This land stretches along the southern Himalayan slopes and is separated from western Tibet by a high snow-clad mountain ridge. It is inhabited by Bhotia ethnic group, which includes Rongpo and Choko people. For 5 years, I've been traveling solo and in the company of my friends in the Choko-populated region and have visited most of the valleys and villages. We stayed with the locals and enjoyed sharing meals with them. The Chokas are genuinely friendly and open for contacts. What struck me as peculiar was their phenotypic heterogeneity. Some of them had Mongolian-type faces, while others had distinctly European features. This seems particularly interesting as the Chokas typically marry within their ethnic group and village population is predominantly monoethnic too. There are no reliable data about the origin of Bhotia people. The word Bhot refers to Tibet. In fact, Bhot was the ancient name of Tibet. However, the people who dwelled along Tibetan borderlines got their name from the British. Although Sir John Strachey considers the word Bhot more of an ethnographic rather than geographic term, Bhotia people, both Rongpo and Choko, refused to admit that they originated from Tibet. They repeatedly stated that their ancestors were Rajputs that emigrated to Tibet in the distant past and crossed the Himalaya again to settle on its southern slopes. Hence, they are sometimes called quasi-Tibetans. Atkinson supported the theory of immigration and re-immigration because the existence of Rajput colonies in the early history of Tibet is a proven fact. It is possible that the Bhotia are descendants of the Scythians who came to the region in distant antiquity from Central Asia through the Khyber Pass. In any case, the Bhotians are ethno-linguistically related to Tibet. Life of these fearless traders and cattle breeders has always been historically tied to trade with Tibet, Nepal and India, at the junction of which they live today. So when we talk about the borders between the Himalayan states, we refer to recent history. However, Tibet as a single state doesn't exist today, and neither it had been there before the arrival of Buddhism. The territory of the present-day Western Tibet at this time was occupied by this great kingdom of Shangshung. The same can be said about the independent state of Nepal and British India, which did not exist at that time, but we have references to Choko people inhabiting those highlands. Many old legends that were passed down from generation to generation have come down to us. A lot of legends were recorded and beautifully published. I strongly recommend to those who are interested in the topic to get hold of The Throne of Gods, the book published by Kumaon Mandal Vikas Nigam Publishing House. I can't say how grateful I am to the publishers for this grandiose piece of work. In search of information, I visited the Ethnographic Museum in Mentiari and I bought some books there. In one of them, I found the story of Shakya Lama. One of the myths from Kumaon region tells us that long time ago, Malajohar was inhabited by a tribe of serpent people. Passages to Hunza, Tibet, were yet to be discovered, and no connection could be established between the population of Malajohar and the Tibetans. The serpent people grew some crops on their meager fields to feed themselves and provide for the living. But one day, Chongpya, a scary demon bird, was born in the origins of Goriganga. Her wings were so huge that whenever she tried to fly from Laspa to Mapang, she couldn't get through the narrow gorge. So she had to fly back, and this is why she never reached Munsiari. Once Chokpya tasted human meat, she couldn't stop herself until she gobbled up all the people and all the animals in Upper Johar. Up above Johar Valley, somewhere in the Laptil region, there lived and practiced in a secluded cave Shakya Lama, a man who possessed many great siddhas. In the morning, he would leave the cave and flew to his secret spot, where he would spend his day praying and performing rituals. By night, he would return to the cave. There were also a few disciples in the cave who lived with Shakya Lama and served him. As soon as Lama, who possessed supernatural siddhas, heard about the atrocities of the demon bird, he sent two of his best disciples southwards in the direction of Johar. He assigned one of the disciples to kill Chongpya and repopulate this land again. The other disciple was assigned as a guide to the warrior. The two disciples obeyed and set off to complete their mission. Once they reached the area where the certain people lived, the guide turned into a Samdao rabbit and disappeared. Today, the location bears the name of Samdon and is a village right in front of Brijganga Pass. Having defeated the demon bird, the warrior set the ground on fire and thought to himself, if the land is still aflame when I return, it means the land is fertile. If the fire ceases to burn, then the land is barren. And he hurried back to his teacher. The victorious disciple arrived back to Shakya Lama and told him the whole story of killing the demon bird, and that the land of Johar is suitable for growing vegetables, but lacks salt reservoirs. To this, Lama replied that the salt marshes are out there, and he would move them closer to Laptil, while his disciple had to go back to Johar and set up new villages there. After that, Shakya Lama went for the seclusion forever. However, before he was gone, he asked his disciples to block up the entrance with stones and boulders, so that nobody could ever disturb him again. He had endowed the warrior with enough power to rid Johar of the demon bird, and Lama's life force was depleted. The will of Shakya Lama was sacred for his disciples. They reached Samdao to check whether the land was still aflame. The ground was still smoldering. So they called together people from surrounding valleys and announced that they had found a habitable valley. People who had heard the calling came to inhabit the valley. They built new villages, brought livestock, and took up farming. And they worshipped Shakya Lama. Ever since, people of the entire region have been called Shoka or Shoka. The highest peak of Tibet, Gurla Mandada, rises in the southwest of the Tibetan plateau opposite the western Nepalese Himalayas. The sacred Kailas is behind Mansarovar and Rakshastal lakes. The undisputed queen of Uttarakhand is definitely Nanda Devi, venerated as a goddess in the entire region. The other prominent peak of the region is Nilkant, in the shadow of which the Vishnu temple of Badrinath. And finally, the highest peak on the south side of Gangotri Glacier is Kedarnath, at the foot of which is the famous Shaivite temple of the same name. One might say that the land of Bhot is the kind of Palestine of the Indian subcontinent. So what does religious worship looks like in the region? Shaivism prevails in Rudraprayag, where Kedarnath is the main religious center. Badrinath, the Mecca of Vaishnavas, is situated in Mana Valley, district of Chamoli, and inhabited by Rongpo people. In the Chamoli district, inhabited by the Rongpo, the Mana Valley is dominated by Vaishnavism, with its center of attraction in Badrinath. To the east, in the Niti Valley, Shaktism prevails and is an extraordinary sanctuary of Nanda Devi, the highest mountain of the region. Once every 12 years, a pilgrimage, Nanda Devi Jat Yatra, is held in honor of the mountain goddess. Pilgrims have to overcome about 280 kilometers on foot and visit all Nanda Devi temples on the way, including the highest ones, and finish at the western face Nanda Devi in Rockpond. The areas around Pitaragar and Darchula are inhabited by the Shoka, who have a different attitude to religion. Shokas, indigenous people of the central and eastern areas, treat any of the Sanatana Dharma teachings equally. Johari Shoka. Johari Valley is inhabited exclusively by Johari Shoka, and the worship of Devi is felt strongly in the valley, which is quite close to Chamoli district. One can find a few Nanda Devi temples there, two of which being the most prominent. One of them is in the lower Johar, while the other is in Munsiari. One can easily drive to Munsiari, but if you're determined to reach the other prominent Nanda Devi temple located in the village of Martoli, be prepared for at least a 3-day challenging trek. The view of Nanda Devi on a clear day from that temple is quite impressive. Nanda Devi Raj Jat Yatra is not held in the Johar Valley, although the goddess is still worshipped there. Lots of people of Uttarakhand participate in Kaal Kamho, the ritual of collecting Brahma Kamal, the main place for which is next to the temple of Martoli at the eastern face of Nanda Devi. Worship of Nanda Devi does not come into conflict with the Asian beliefs. Shaktis have been under the district influence of animism. Nanda Devi is a mountain goddess who is revered in the central region of the land of Bhot. Ancient cults of the gods of nature have been included into Hindu tradition, which was introduced much later. Religious syncretism and flexible approach to beliefs are characteristic of all the Shokas. The further east we move through the lands of Bhot, the weaker the influence of Hinduism and the more significant tribal gods become. In the valleys inhabited by Rang Shoka, the role of Hinduism is less prominent than in the village of Johari Shoka. In Dharma Valley, Devi temple, quite large by Himalayan standards, can be found in the middle Sela village. No yatras dedicated to Nanda Devi are held in Dharma Valley, while regional gods are honored respectfully. People from Balinga vied with each other to tell me about the hill with ancestors' gold temple behind the Danto village, and off I went to see it. On a high and long range with a panoramic view of Dharma Valley and an imposing mountain mass of Panchachuli, I found a lot of humble shrines. The biggest temple is dedicated to Mahadev and scattered around other little temples of the local deities. Both in Johar and Dharma valleys, there is a sacred place or a stone in front of each house, as well as stone amulets on the roofs, symbolizing the local deities, as the local explained to me. The same kind of oblong white stones can be found on the altars of the humble alpine temples. Unlike Johari Shoka, people in the upper villages of Dharmani Shoka, as well as in all rank Shoka communities, flagpoles are placed in front of their houses. They are made of thin, tall, dry tree trunks, with a few branches left at the very tops. One can see the same time of poles with prayers of the wing flags fluttering in the wind in the old photographs taken in the region. I came across those photos in the book entitled In the Forbidden Land. It was written by Henry Lander, the adventurous British traveler, who was the first European to visit these parts. Once he got back from his breathtaking journey, Henry wrote a full-length description of his adventures, as well as Shoka people and their life in detail. He was also the first to draw a detailed map of the region. Endless pilgrim caravans traveling via Byansi Shoka villages and Lipule and Tinkarla passes to the sacred Kailas mountain left no impact on the religious scene of the valley. A perfect illustration of this balance is a photograph I took on the Nepalese village of Changru, where a small Shiva temple is surrounded by poles with Buddhist prayer flags. In the same way, Shoka make out earlier the territory around the ancestral temples. I spent 3 nights in Changra at a local inn. Its owner turned out to be the wealthiest man of the region. He introduced himself to me as a local lama. To my question about his religion, he called himself a Shiva devotee. Lama told me that people who lived in Changru turned to him on a variety of issues, such as medical treatment and household issues. He gave me some treatment too. Born Buddhist and Hindu traditions intermingled, forming a bizarre mixture of cults, rituals, and customs, where a shaman worships Shiva, a Buddhist brings offerings to Maharishi Vedavyasa, and a Hindu gets treatment from a lama, and they all honor ancestral spirits. This kind of religious syncretism and flexible approach to beliefs is characteristic of all the Shokas. You will see tied ribbons on temples, passes, and mountain trails. In the village of Tinkar, the highest mountain village of Byansi Shoka, flags with flying prayers flutter on high poles in front of the houses, the echoes of the Buddhism and strong ties with Tibet that flourished here once. Although Shokas who live in the hard-to-reach Himalayan valleys were influenced by both Buddhism and Hinduism, they never lost touch with their tribal beliefs. There was a powerful lama in every village, the myths and deities people worshipped, the demons they sought protection from, and the heroes who defeated the demons. Life under the patronage of the local deities has always been more important for highland Shokas, who always struggled for survival in the vicissitudes of climate and the difficulties of the trans-Himalayan alpine business. In fact, they would always give them preference as compared to the reflections on the unity of Atman and Brahman. Pragmatic approach of the Shoka to the religious and racial identity helped their trans-Himalayan business flourish. They lived at the junction of 2 very different agroecological zones, the arid Tibetan plateau in the north and the subtropical hills of Lesser Himalaya in the south. This enabled Shoka to play a central role in developing trans-Himalayan trade for both sides. Resilient and undemanding highlanders, they became the rulers of the trans-Himalayan trade. Hindu Paharis of Himachal were equally physically fit, but they failed to compete with the Shoka because the Tibetans denied the Paharis the right to be present in their markets. Hindu never shared their food with Tibetans and refused to drink their traditional tea, and the Tibetans didn't trade with people they couldn't sit down to the table with. The Shoka, on the other hand, were unbiased and did not adhere to strict caste restrictions, and were previously and are now not vegetarians. They managed to adapt to both Hindu and Tibetan trade partners and acted accordingly. In the lower valleys, with predominantly Hindu population, they too worshipped Hindu gods, while in Tibet they did the same in the Buddhist shrines. There is a good reason that they are still called double dealers. Cultural adaptability is the key to understanding success of the Shoka in the trans-Himalayan trade. Somewhere between 1770 and 1830, the British East India Company made several unsuccessful attempts to get access to the Tibetan plateau. They had observed the trade in the region and began to consider the land of Bhot as a gateway to Tibet. To win the loyalty of the locals, the British granted the Shoka the exclusive legal status, providing tax breaks and demonstrated hands-off approach to the traditional trade agreements between the countries. Kumaon was recognized as an unregulated province and was not ruled by law, but rather at the discretion of the authorities. The Shoka traditionally had been paying their land tax to the Tibetans and stuck to this routine. They resolutely retained this practice during the formal transition under the protectorate of the British India. The Shoka did not want the tax conflict between the Tibetan and British administrations to affect their trade relations with Tibet. The freedom in the relations with the administration contributed to shaping a peculiar free spirit in the Shoka. People of Darchula told me that Rang Shoka keep the whole region in hand. Locals consider Shoka as smart and pragmatic, not to say cruel people. This being said, they admit that Rang Shoka are highly reliable business partners whose word is their law. Once Tibet had been invaded by China, the trans-Himalayan trade in the area gradually began to fade away. After the bilateral conflict between India and China in 1962, the borders were sealed and Indian Shokas lost their business altogether. At Untadhura Pass had been closed too. The trans-Himalayan trade was stopped, the villages have become empty, and the dwellings appear to be in a deplorable state. What has always distinguished Shoka was their ability to get the highest possible profit from their position. They no longer insisted on their Rajput origin, and in 1967 were recognized as the scheduled tribe. This meant a lot of benefits, such as the ancestral land title, labor quotas, university scholarships, and many others. Rang Shoka community suffered less from the Himalayan wars. Both Indian and Nepalese Shokas joined the Tinkarla Pass on the Nepalese Biansi land, while Nepalese Biansi drove their caravans along both Indian and Nepalese banks of Mahakali River. In 1992, a major event for Rang Shoka took place. China and India agreed to open Lipule Indian Pass for pilgrims and trade caravans. People of the border areas near Pithogarh and Darchula do not need visas to cross Tibetan border. Under the agreement with the Chinese government, they are allowed to visit borderline markets of Tibet. Schneiderman argued that the high-altitude borderline area of South Asia is the land of the several states that goes beyond the individual sovereignty of any individual state. The former states vanished, the new ones appeared instead, but technically the Himalayan cargo transportation remains the same. The same beautifully decorated caravans perfectly fitting into the surrounding landscapes, the same hard-working mules, the same wooden saddles as 200 years ago, the same sacks sewn from the same fabric. Large flocks of sheep and goats are also involved in the local trade. Where a horse or mule cannot pass, a light-footed goat will easily run. For sheep and goats, horse bags are sewn with pockets on their sides. Each pocket can accommodate up to 5 kilos of luggage. It means that each goat can carry up to 10 kilos of cargo, and a whole flock will carry more than a caravan of mules.
Namaste.
I watched how the cargo delivered by a caravan of mules was replaced on the banks of Mahakali into horsebacks worn by goats, and the mule caravan ran light back to Varchula. Shoko used sheep and goats for cargo transportation from time immemorial. Down the mountain slopes and in the valleys, ancient Shoko villages look like cynically scattered stones. Shokas set their villages up only in the valleys from which mountain passes led to Tibet. We can tentatively divide all villages into 3 groups: lower, those in the middle, and upper villages. People in the middle and lower villages are mostly engaged in farming. We were greatly impressed by the fruitful communal fields, generous gardens, and private vegetable gardens of Rapla.
А лучок-то какой? Лучок? Или это чесночок? Это чесночок, по-моему.
Even in the upper villages, local Shokas managed to grow some vegetables on the poor stony soil.
И вырастет горошек.
One can still find ancient thrushes in the villages. In local language, those are called ghatas. Before going down to the lower villages, Shokas hide the remains of their harvest in the underground cellars, safely closed and disguised by stones and earth. In the upper Baling village up above Dharma Valley, my hostess and her son took me to see their winter storehouse where they keep vegetables. The hostess went down to the cellar and started to sort the good veggies from the spoiled ones. I must say, a good deal of veggies have been nibbled by rodents. The higher in the mountains, the more authentic the villages look. There are very few houses under construction. It's too difficult to bring the building materials over in the absence of roads, not to say how expensive it is. Most houses are quite old. Some have been built over 100 years ago. Henry Savage Landor, a British travel journalist, artist, and anthropologist, was the first foreigner to step onto this land. He left not only a description of the region, but also a lot of invaluable photographs and drawings. When I compare his miniatures of Garbanga dated 1897 with the pictures of Garbanga which I took in 2018 from the opposite bank of Mahakali, I can't see that the houses have changed much over the last 120 years. Let's have a closer look at the houses. They are made of stones and are mostly 2-storied. Rarely have they 3 stories. Houses have tile roofs with tiles made of mica. The old mica tiles are almost never restored, unfortunately, and metal roofs look completely out of place, more so when it gets corroded. When it rains, the noise is almost too loud to let you sleep, while mica tiles soften unwanted sounds. Before entering the house, let's have a look at the intricate woodwork contrasting the ascetic household. The windows are not glazed, and the interior of the houses is protected from the cold and foul weather by the wooden shutters. Byaltsi Shoka adorned the windows and door frames with artful woodwork, while the houses of Johari Shoka look quite modest. The more intricate the woodwork, the wealthier the owner of the house was. I've learned that the rich house owners used to bring wood carvers from as far as Almora. Apart from abstract ornaments, there are floral motifs in the patterns. Where conifers grow, you can see beautifully carved cones in the decor. The snake theme is very popular too, and no wonder. Many ancient legends of Shoka are associated with snakes. According to legend, the Johar Valley was once inhabited by a tribe of snake people, and the name of Nagling village, located in the Dharma Valley, directly indicates the connection between the village and snakes. The most beautiful Shoka village, as recognized by all, is the high-altitude Nepalese village of Tinkar. So, shall we go inside? As a rule, the ground floor is a utility floor and is not residential. Living quarters are usually located on the first floor. Kitchens are in the house, and during cooking the living rooms are filled with smoke. But in the upper villages, very few people can afford such luxury as a separate kitchen, and the precious warmth of the hearth heats the entire living space. The interior of the rich Shoka house reminds that of Tibet. Minimal furniture, wooden cabinet racks in the wall openings, chests for storing things. All life in the house takes place on the floor. There are no chairs or sofas, and beds are extremely rare. The floors are covered with carpets woven by the village craftswomen. While traveling in the land of Bhot, we were lucky to observe the process of carpet weaving in two villages at once, in Rapla and in Dumlin. I'd like to illustrate an expert from Henry Lander's book In the Forbidden Land with my videos. Accompanying their men on trading or pilgrimage trips to Tibet, Shoka women got acquainted with women of related Tibetan tribes, mainly Khampa. It was from them that they learned the art of carpet weaving. Thus, the typical Tibetan ornament came from Tibet to North India and Nepal. Shoka looms are similar to Tibetan ones and are quite simply arranged. Shoka's loom has no pedals and all work is done by hand. The wool of yak, goats or sheep is used for weaving fabrics. and shoka carpets. And the thread is not twisted, which retains greasiness and makes the fabric waterproof. In carpet weaving, red, blue, green, and yellow colors are used. Blue and red are used much more often and in approximately the same proportion, while green and yellow dyes are used very sparingly. Shoka women are masters of this ancient art. Day after day, they sit and patiently weave beautiful, intricate designs. The patterns are abstract. They do not include smooth lines and circles, and are made up completely of straight lines and angles, combinations of small diamonds and squares. All patterns in their multicolored products are woven from memory. Apart from carpets, shoka women make fabrics on their looms, more often in natural colors, but sometimes they are dyed red, blue, green, or yellow. These fabrics are extremely durable. Narrow-colored fabric of the best quality is used mainly for warm men's clothing and bags in which money and food are carried. The coarser fabrics are used to make goat bags and mule bags. Over time, the carpet patterns of the Bhot land have undergone some changes, and the typical naive style of shoka weaving has emerged. The trans-Himalayan trade has formed shoka community whose way of life is built about the success of their historic business. Shokas not only drove their caravans and accompanied caravans that belonged to other people, but also took a fee for the transit of goods through their territories. Some shokas run their own small businesses, serving travelers going up or down the valley. Modest inns, dukkans, are scattered along the entire route. Caravanners and pilgrims eat, rest, make some purchases in dukkans. Dukkans can be of varying degrees of comfort, although the word comfort is not entirely appropriate here. Sometimes these are just huts covered with a blue plastic. The locations are unchanged, as are the families that own them, and the cordiality with which the owners serve their guests. What they lack in comfort, they make up for in plentiful, delicious food and exceptional friendliness. In those dukkans, in the company of the caravanners, we dined and spent the nights. Local people also stay there during seasonal migration. The fact is, shokas are called moving people. Their way of life can be defined as semi-nomadic. In the cold season, shokas from the upper villages come down, and with the advent of spring in late April, early May, they go back up. The seasonal migration is called kancha. Neither dilapidated roads nor snowy bridges over turbulent mountain rivers frighten those people who, like migratory birds, take to the wings and rush to the homes of their ancestors. Those people have no doubts, and with the advent of spring, they rush up the mountain paths. Leaving the comfortable zone of tropical mountain farming, they go to a place where snow can suddenly fall in summer, and temperatures can drop to freezing overnight. Both young and old, loaded with numerous belongings, and those who travel by it, go up. The call of blood and love for the expanses of mountains turn out to be stronger than domestic discomfort and the difficulties of migration.